Hello, brother. How was your day today? If possible, please let me know where you are on Earth. As for me, my day was quite boring. Let me share it with you. Today at school, I had a bit of a debate with my classmates on the following topics: history and historical mysteries. The question here is the forgotten truth about Titanic's hidden cargo, and I will share my personal views. Let's analyze it together. We were standing on a dock in the pre-dawn chill of Southampton. April 10th, 1912. The air is thick with coal dust and the brine of the Atlantic. Before you, a steel mountain eclipses the stars. The RMS Titanic, a marvel of engineering, a declaration of human ambition. But as the last of the passengers board, in the cavernous belly of the ship, a different story is being loaded into the dark. A story sealed in crates and recorded on ledgers, a truth that will soon be entombed in 2.5 miles of crushing, icy water. After this video, you'll never look at the world the same way. Before the tension gets too high, take a moment to like the episode and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. In the comments below, tell me your location and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Down the lights, prepare yourself, and let's unravel this hidden truth together. Your investigation doesn't begin in the wreck, scattered across the abyssal plain. It begins in a dusty, forgotten archive room, under the dim glow of a single green-shaded lamp. You're not looking for a smoking gun. You're looking for the paper trail that precedes it. In your hands is a replica of the Titanic's official cargo manifest, a document that feels deceptively simple, almost boring. You run your finger down the typed lines. 30 cases of tennis balls for a G. Spaulding. 76 cases of dragon's blood, a resin used for varnish and photo engraving. 63 cases of champagne. Hundreds of cases of anchovies, shelled walnuts and rabbit meat. Gallons of wine, barrels of oysters, boxes of cigars. It's a snapshot of Edwardian luxury, a floating storehouse for the Gilded Age elite. This is the official story, the one presented to the world. And this is where the first layer of psychological misdirection begins. A manifest this mundane serves a powerful purpose. It acts as a sedative for curiosity. Who would look for a profound secret hidden among marmalade and ostrich feathers? You analyze the document not for what it contains, but for the narrative it constructs. It's a performance of normalcy, a perfectly calibrated piece of stagecraft designed to make the extraordinary seem ordinary. The sheer volume of common goods creates a kind of camouflage, a forest where anyone trying to hide a single, very different tree could do so with ease. This isn't just a shipping list, it's a firewall. It reflects a deep understanding of human psychology. People rarely question the details when the overall picture seems familiar, but you're trained to spot the dissonant notes in a carefully composed symphony. Your research into historical organizations with limited public records has shown you this pattern before. You recall studying the ciphers of the Knights of the Golden Circle, an American secret society from the 19th century. They never used complex cryptographic keys for their most sensitive messages. Instead, they embedded their codes within agricultural reports and shipping manifests. A shipment of 12 barrels of corn to a specific port might not mean corn at all. Now, it could be a coded signal for a delivery of 12 rifles. The genius of their method was its invisibility. Use the mundane machinery of commerce as a carrier for its hidden agenda. Could the same principle be at play here? A system where the quantity of one item, cross-referenced with the type of another, creates a message legible only to the initiated. The list in your hands begins to feel less like a record and more like a riddle. You lean back, considering the mindset required to orchestrate such a thing. This isn't the work of a common criminal. This is the quiet, methodical work of institutional power, of minds that operate on a global chessboard, moving pieces that the rest of us don't even know are in play. There's a particular kind of arrogance in it, of belief that the truth can be managed, packaged and filed away, hidden in plain sight from the prying eyes of the masses. You can almost feel the cold precision of the planners, the steady hands that signed off on this document, knowing its dual purpose. They weren't just loading a ship. They were curating a historical record in advance, ensuring that if anything went wrong, the official story would be the only one left to tell. The very document meant to provide clarity becomes the primary tool of obfuscation. And as your eyes scan the long list of exports one last time, A chill runs down your spine. Amidst the cases of wine and rolls of linoleum, one entry stands out for its singularity. It's an anomaly, a detail so specific and yet so vague that it feels like a deliberate flaw in the tapestry. A loose thread begging to be pulled. Most items are listed in bulk, but this one is starkly alone. The manifest lists 1 case of opium, 12 cases of raw feathers, and thousands of other goods. But the real question remained. Why was there only a single Renault-type CB Coupe de Ville automobile listed in the hold, and who or what was it truly for? That single entry on the manifest becomes the focal point of your investigation. The car without a driver? A 25-horsepower Renault-type CB Coupe de Ville, encased in a wooden crate, sitting cold and silent in cargo hold No. 2? Somewhere near the bow on the port side. You push aside the musty ledgers and turn to a different set of records. Insurance claims filed in the wake of the disaster, and there you find it. The answer seems to come almost too easily. The claim was filed by one William Ernest Carter of Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, a first-class passenger traveling with his wife, Lucille, and their 2 children. He had purchased the car in Europe and was bringing it home. The claim amount, $5,000, a significant sum for the era. The case, it seems, is closed before it even truly opened. The car had a driver, an owner, and a clear paper trail. But you feel a familiar sense of unease. In your experience analyzing unexplained historical events, a neat, tidy answer is often more suspicious than a glaring inconsistency. It's a psychological stop sign, a narrative cul-de-sac designed to halt further inquiry. The human mind craves resolution. Give it a plausible name and a dollar figure, and it will likely move on, satisfied. You recognize this as a classic technique of information management. You provide a simple, verifiable truth to mask a complex, uncomfortable one. The story of the wealthy man and his expensive toy is a perfect distraction. It's relatable, it's straightforward, and it asks nothing more of the observer. It's the magician showing you his right hand while his left hand performs the trick. You decide to treat the official story not as an answer, but as a deliberate piece of misdirection. You pull on the thread of William Carter, coal and iron fortunaire, a polo player, a member of Philadelphia's high society. He fits the profile of a Renault owner perfectly. But as you dig, you realize he is too perfect. He is a character from a novel about the rich, not a key player in the shadowy world of global power. He is what intelligence operatives would call a clean skin, a person with a public life so transparent and predictable that they are paradoxically the perfect vessel for a secret. No one would ever suspect him of being anything other than what he appeared to be. This is where your investigation pivots from the public record to the whispers in the archives of technological history. You uncover obscure monographs detailing the anxieties of the early 20th century. It wasn't just about looming war, it was about industrial and technological supremacy. The automobile was the new frontier, a symbol of freedom and progress, but also a complex piece of machinery representing a new kind of power. Your research unearths whispers of a peculiar historical organization, a loose collective of visionary engineers, futurists, and financiers, known in some circles only as the mechanists. They were not a secret society in the mystical sense. They were a pragmatic one. They believed the future would be won not by armies, but by those who controlled the most advanced technology. And they had a bizarre, almost paranoid method for transferring their most sensitive intellectual property blueprints, chemical formulas, and revolutionary schematics. They never trusted paper, which could be copied, stolen, or burned. Instead, they practiced a form of mechanical steganography. They would micro-etch their designs onto the individual components of complex machinery. A new gear ratio for an engine wouldn't be drawn on paper, would be physically built into a seemingly standard. The cold, hard logic of the Renault mechanical codex sinking into the abyss feels like a tangible secret, something you can almost grasp. But as you trace the path of this industrial ghost, you feel a psychic shift in the archives. The scent of motor oil and steel gives way to something far older, the dry, dusty smell of tomb dust and papyrus. You've stumbled upon a different kind of hidden cargo, one not listed on any manifest because it existed purely in the realm of narrative. It's whispered from passenger to passenger in the smoking rooms and lounges. This is the story of the unlucky mummy, a tale so potent it has overshadowed the Titanic disaster itself for over a century. And you realize a perfect story can be more valuable and more dangerous cargo than any physical object. Your focus narrows to one man, a figure who acted as the human epicenter for this viral tale, William T. Stead. You find his file, and the details paint a vivid picture. He's not a footnote in the tragedy. He was a giant of his time. A crusading journalist, a peace activist, spiritualist who communicated with the dead, and a man who, in a chilling piece of self-fulfilling prophecy, had written a story 26 years earlier about a mail steamer sinking in the Atlantic after striking another vessel, with immense loss of life. On the night of the sinking, survivors reported seeing Stead calmly reading a book in the first-class smoking room as the ship went down. He was a man fascinated by the intersection of the material and the spectral, and he was the perfect vector for a story like The Mummy's Curse. The verifiable fact isn't about a mummy. It's about the presence of a world-famous paranormal investigator and storyteller on a ship that was about to become the greatest ghost story of the modern age. The tale itself is a masterpiece of psychological horror. It centers on the sarcophagus of a priestess of Amun-Ra. Discovered at Thebes in the late 1890s, the legend claims that every person who came into contact with it met a grim fate. The man who bought it died mysteriously. The photographer who took its picture, the curator who handled it all, met with ruin or death. The British Museum, its supposed destination, refused it, deeming it too malevolent. So, a private American collector purchased it and arranged for its transport to New York. The only vessel grand enough, and supposedly safe enough, was the Titanic. The story insists the sarcophagus was too large and valuable to be placed in the hold, so it was situated in the bridge house. Right behind the captain's bridge, its ancient malevolent eyes staring out into the freezing night. You analyze this narrative not as history, but as a weaponized meme. It's brilliantly constructed to prey on the deepest human fears, the wrath of the old gods, the power of the unknown, and the hubris of modern man. A curse is a far more emotionally satisfying. The Mummy's Curse was a ghost, a perfect phantom designed to haunt the public consciousness and obscure the truth. But you know that every ghost is cast by the shadow of a real object. As you sift through the archives, you let the spectral narrative of the priestess of Amun-Ra fade, and in its place, a tangible, glittering reality emerges from the darkness. You find it not in whispers of the paranormal, but in the cold, hard records of Lloyd's of London and the ledger books of a specific bindery in Holborn. The search for a concrete secret ends here, with an object of almost mythical beauty, a magnificent, jewel-encrusted edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This is your verifiable historical fact, a truth far stranger than fiction. Commissioned by the renowned London bookbinders Sangorski and Sutcliffe, this wasn't just a book, it was a treasure that blurred the line between literature and jewelry. You stare at a black and white photograph of it, the only one ever taken, and even in monochrome, its opulence is staggering. The front cover alone was a masterpiece, adorned with 3 golden peacocks, their tails a kaleidoscope of inlaid precious stones, their eyes tiny rubies. The entire binding was encrusted with 1,050 jewels, each one set in 18-karat gold emeralds, sapphires, amethysts, and topazes, all surrounded by intricate gold leaf tooling on green Morocco leather. It took 2 years of continuous labor to create. Nicknamed the Great Omar, it was sold at auction to an American buyer for £405, a price considered disappointingly low at the time, but its insured value was far greater. It was packed into an oak case and placed in the hold of the first available liner sailing for New York, the RMS Titanic. You analyze the psychological impact of this object. Like The Mummy's Curse, the story of the lost Great Omar is a powerful narrative. It is a tale of unparalleled artistic achievement, meeting its doom at the hands of indifferent nature. It speaks to hubris, beauty, loss, and the romantic tragedy of a treasure forever beyond reach. For over a century, divers and dreamers have fantasized about finding it. A glittering prize in the mud of the abyssal plain. And in this fantasy, you recognize another masterful layer of misdirection. The book's monetary and artistic value is so overwhelming, so captivating, that it consumes all curiosity. It becomes another convenient endpoint for the story, a satisfyingly tragic conclusion. Why look for conspiracies about finance or politics when you can dream of sunken jewels? The book acts as a narrative black hole, its immense cultural gravity pulling all other lines of inquiry into it and extinguishing them. But you have learned to look past the surface value. Omar Khayyam was not just a poet, he was a brilliant mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher. His quatrains, while beautiful, often hint at a deeper, more mystical understanding of the cosmos. This leads you to investigate the circles that you let the glittering image of the lost great Omar sink into the blackness of your mind. A key without a lock, a treasure turned to dust in memory. The power of art, of mysticism, is a subtle force. Now you turn your attention to a power that is anything but subtle. You move from the world of poets and occultists to the cold, hard realm of industry and finance, where empires are built not on verses, but on iron, steel, and gold. And at the absolute center of this world stands one man, John Pierpont Morgan. His connection to the Titanic isn't peripheral. He is the nexus. The ship was his. Your verifiable fact is stark and undisputed. J.P. Morgan, the owner of the International Mercantile Marine Company, the parent corporation of the White Star Line, had a personal suite reserved for him on the Titanic's maiden voyage. It was the most opulent set of rooms on the ship. The Promenade Suite B-52, B-54, and B-56 is complete with its own private 50-foot-long deck. He was not just a passenger. He was the emperor set to preside over the triumphal procession of his newest, greatest creation. Press from around the world had heralded his upcoming presence. His participation was the final seal of approval, the ultimate statement of confidence in the vessel. And then, at the last possible moment, he canceled. He was in Aix-les-Bains, France. The official stories vary slightly. One version claims he was ill. Another, more widely circulated account states he decided to remain in France to appreciate his vast art collection and purchase more tapestries. He disembarked from his own ship before it ever sailed and was photographed in Paris while the Titanic was taking on. Passengers in Southampton. You analyze this act from a psychological perspective. This is a man whose entire life was a monument to precision, control, and calculated action. J.P. Morgan did not do things by accident. His every move was scrutinized on Wall Street, in London, and in Berlin. He understood that for a man of his stature, personal actions were public pronouncements. For him to publicly book passage on his flagship and then back out citing a sudden interest in tapestries is not just an excuse. It's an insult to the intelligence of anyone paying attention. It's a performance of nonchalance so blatant that it becomes an act of aggression. It's a signal. In the world of high finance, you don't need to send a coded telegram to warn of a collapsing market. The richest man in the room simply has to be seen quietly walking towards the exit. Morgan wasn't just canceling a vacation. He was exiting the theater before the final tragic act he himself had set in motion. This is where you delve into the unexplored perspectives of financial warfare. You uncover whispers of an informal, ultra-exclusive fraternity of financiers. It's known only in the deepest circles of research as the Janus Conclave. Their name comes from the two-faced Roman god of beginnings and endings, doorways and transitions. They were the ultimate pragmatists who saw history as a series of financial opportunities. Their bizarre and defining doctrine was something they called timeline pruning. They believed that major historical events were like forks in the road, and that by applying overwhelming financial pressure or withdrawing it at critical moments, J.P. Morgan's vacant suite hangs in your mind like a ghost, a negative space that speaks louder than any occupied room. His absence was a signal, a sell order on the timeline. Now you must identify the asset being liquidated. You turn from the man who wasn't there to the men who were. Cross-referencing the first-class passenger list with the most contentious political and financial battle of the era. The name of this battle, the creation of the Federal Reserve. Here is your verifiable historical fact. A piece of the public record that is often mentioned but rarely connected with the full weight of its implications. On board the Titanic, in the opulent suites of its first-class accommodations, were three of the wealthiest and most powerful men in America. And all three were vocal, formidable opponents of the plan to create a centralized American bank. A plan fiercely championed by a consortium of financiers led by none other than J.P. Morgan. The names are a roll call of the old money establishment: John Jacob Astor, for scion of one of America's greatest fortunes; Benjamin Guggenheim, heir to a massive mining dynasty; Isidor Straus, the owner of Macy's department store. These were not just rich men. They were titans of industry, men with the influence, wealth, and conviction to stand against the powerful current of financial change Morgan and his allies were trying to force upon the nation. All three men perished in the sinking. You analyze this as a strategic problem, a cold equation of power. The creation of a central bank, the future Federal Reserve, was not merely a financial reform. It was the largest consolidation of financial power in modern history. It would give a small group of private bankers the ability to create money out of thin air, to control the nation's credit, and to profit from its debt. It was a financial coup. Dita Trest, in the respectable close of monetary policy. Astor, Guggenheim, and Straus represented the old guard, men whose wealth was rooted in tangible assets: real estate, industry, and commerce. They saw the proposed central bank as a threat, a dangerous cartel that would undermine the U.S. Constitution and place the nation's economy at the mercy of a handful of unaccountable elites. Their opposition was not trivial. It was a roadblock. With their combined resources and influence, they had the power to stop the legislation in its tracks. As you dig deeper, you unearth unexplored perspectives on the nature of these men's opposition. It wasn't just about protecting their own wealth. It was ideological. You find pamphlets and records of speeches where they articulated a deep, philosophical distrust of centralized financial control. This leads you to a bizarre detail concerning a historical organization that has been largely dismissed by mainstream historians: the League of the Honest Dollar. It wasn't a secret society, but a public advocacy group that is almost entirely forgotten today. Their quirky, defining belief was that the men are gone. Astor, Guggenheim, Straus, three pillars of the old world, erased from the board in a single, masterful move of geopolitical chess. The path is now clear for the creation of a new kind of financial empire, the one you glimpsed in the blueprints for the Federal Reserve. You can almost feel the cold satisfaction of the architects of this plan, the quiet closing of a ledger on a problem solved. But a ship like the Titanic, a world unto itself, is a complex ecosystem. Removing the apex predators causes a cascade of effects all the way down the food chain. As you pull your focus away from the rarefied air of first class, you let your investigation sink down through the decks, past the cabins and the engine rooms, back into the dark and silent cargo hold. And there, you catch a scent. Not of leather or champagne, but something sweet, acrid, and illicit. You return to the cargo manifest, the document that has become your Rosetta Stone for this entire mystery. Remember that single, innocuous entry for one case of opium? It's a verifiable historical fact. At the time, opium was a legal, if heavily regulated, component in many patent medicines. The manifest shows the case was destined for a pharmaceutical company in New York. It is a detail so mundane, so administratively tidy, that it deflects all suspicion. It's the perfect piece of paper-thin cover. It serves the same psychological purpose as the lists of anchovies and tennis balls. It normalizes. It tells the casual observer that the presence of this powerful substance is a matter of routine commerce. The entry acts as a tranquilizer for curiosity, but you see it for what it is: a foothold. It is the single, visible head of a vast, submerged monster. Your research into the criminal economies of the early 20th century tells you that no major narcotic shipment would ever be declared. But the smugglers of the era were masters of camouflage. The most effective technique was to hide a large illicit shipment within a larger legitimate one. What if that single declared case of opium was the designated decoy, sacrificial lamb designed to be found by customs agents, satisfying their search quotas and allowing the true cargo to pass through unnoticed? You start to investigate the whispers and legends of the New York underworld. And a new theory emerges, one that has nothing to do with finance or politics, but with the brutal mechanics of the drug trade. The theory states that the Titanic was carrying one of the largest shipments of black market opium ever attempted. A consignment so vast it was intended to supply the entire eastern seaboard for a year. This line of inquiry leads you to the shadowy history of the Tongs. the Chinese-American secret societies that waged brutal wars for control of gambling, prostitution, and the incredibly lucrative opium dens. You uncover a bizarre, quirky detail about the operational security of one particularly powerful tong, known in police blotters of the time only as the Silent Dragons. Unlike other gangs who used coded ledgers or verbal passwords, the Silent Dragons had a method of communication that was almost impossible for outsiders to intercept. They practiced a form of alchemy. The smell of phantom opium fades from your mind, replaced by the sharp metallic temps of cordite and munitions oil. You've witnessed the ship act as a tool of political assassination and as an unwitting destroyer of a criminal empire. Now you must confront an even more visceral and explosive possibility, one that reframes the disaster not as a domestic conspiracy, but as an undeclared act of war. You strip away the layers of finance and crime and look at the Titanic for what it was at its most basic level. It's a massive vessel, capable of moving a huge amount of physical material across the Atlantic Ocean, a bridge between the old world and the new. Your investigation leads you to a verifiable historical fact that is often overlooked in the grand romance of the disaster. The Titanic was built in Belfast, at the Harland and Wolff shipyard, city that was a hotbed of geopolitical tension and a global center for shipbuilding. But it wasn't just a commercial shipyard. It was a strategic asset deeply intertwined with the interests of the British Admiralty. The Titanic and its sister ships, the Olympic and the Britannic, were built with a secret dual purpose in mind. Under an agreement with the Royal Navy, they were constructed to be rapidly convertible into armed merchant cruisers or troop transports in the event of a national emergency. Their decks were reinforced to support the weight of naval guns, and their design specifications were pre-approved by the military. The Titanic wasn't just a luxury liner. It was a dormant warship. You analyze the psychology behind this duality. This is a classic example of a nation embedding its military ambitions within its civilian infrastructure. It is a brilliant piece of strategic foresight and public deception. To the world, the Titanic was a symbol of peace, luxury, and international cooperation. To the handful of men in the Admiralty, it was a weapon in waiting. This dual identity creates a powerful cognitive dissonance. The image of the grand staircase and the string quartet playing on the deck is so strong that it becomes almost impossible to reconcile. With the image of 6-inch naval guns being bolted to its promenade, the public narrative of luxury completely erases the latent narrative of war. The ship existed in a state of quantum superposition. It was both a palace and a battleship, and its identity depended entirely on the observer. This realization forces you to re-examine the cargo manifest with a military eye. You are no longer looking for jewels or opium, you are looking for the components of war. This is where you encounter unexplored perspectives on the political climate of 1912. Europe was a powder keg. An intricate web of alliances and rivalries was pulling the great powers closer to a massive conflict. The naval arms race between Britain and Germany was escalating at a terrifying pace. Any movement of military hardware was watched with intense suspicion. And in this tense environment, a passenger liner especially, the Titanic is no longer just a ship. In your mind, it has become a weapon, a tomb, and a treasure chest, all sinking under the weight of its own secrets. You've seen how the physical world can be manipulated, how men can be eliminated, how criminal empires can be shattered, how a secret arsenal can be sent to the bottom of the sea. But the question from your last session lingers, a whisper of static in the silence of the archives. Was the iceberg the only weapon? To answer that, you must turn your attention away from the material world of steel and ice, and into the invisible, ethereal realm of the brand new technology that was the pride of the ship, the wireless telegraph. The verifiable historical fact is this: the Titanic was equipped with one of the most powerful maritime radio transmitters in the world, state-of-the-art 5-kilowatt rotary spark gap transmitter, manufactured and operated by the Marconi Company. The two wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were not employees of the White Star Line. They were Marconi men. Their primary duty was not the ship's safety, but a commercial one: to send and receive Marconigram's personal messages for the wealthy first-class passengers. On the night of April 14th, the wireless room was buzzing. Not with warnings of imminent doom, but with a backlog of telegrams to the Cape Race Station in Newfoundland. It was a commercial enterprise running at full tilt. You must analyze the profound psychological impact this technology had on everyone. From the captain down to the lowest-paying passenger in steerage, the wireless wasn't just a communication device. It was a miracle. It was a tangible symbol of mankind's dominion over nature. For the first time in history, a ship in the middle of the vast, empty ocean was not truly alone. The wireless was a guardian angel, an invisible thread connecting them back to the safety of land. This created a deep, pervasive, and ultimately fatal sense of security. The very presence of the Marconi room acted as a psychological buffer against the primeval fear of the sea. The thinking was simple. If anything goes wrong, we can call for help. This technological hubris subtly lowered the guard of the entire ship. It was a safety net that, by its very existence, encouraged the high-wire act. Now, you apply the lens of the undeclared war you uncovered in the previous section. If you are a German intelligence operative tasked with ensuring the destruction of a secret British munitions transport, you don't leave the outcome to a chance encounter with an iceberg. You manage every variable. You wouldn't just attack the ship's body. You would attack its nervous system. And the ship's nervous system was the Marconi wireless. This brings you to the operational doctrine of a highly secretive branch of German naval intelligence. A unit so clandestine its name appears in only a handful of redacted documents. The Thirk Corps, or the Ether Corps. Here you find the bizarre and chilling detail that illuminates the events of that night. The Ether Corps were pioneers. The airwaves crackle and go silent in your mind. The phantom signals of the Ether Corps fade, leaving you once again in the cold, tangible world of rivets and steel. The idea of an invisible hand guiding the ship to its doom through electronic deception is terrifying. But now, you must confront a possibility that is, in some ways, even more disturbing. It is a deception not of ethereal waves, but of 46,000 tons of solid matter. A deception so vast, so audacious, it hides in plain sight. You have been investigating the contents of the ship, but you now have to ask the most fundamental question of all. Was the ship that sank even the Titanic? This line of inquiry begins with a verifiable historical fact, a violent and costly encounter that took place 7 months before the maiden voyage. On September 20th, 1911, the RMS Olympic, Titanic's older sister ship, and nearly her identical twin, was leaving Southampton when it collided with a British Royal Navy cruiser, the HMS Hawke. The much smaller but sturdily built warship tore 2 massive gashes in the Olympic's starboard hull. One above and one below the waterline, the damage was severe. The Olympic limped back to port with a flooded compartment and a twisted propeller shaft. After a lengthy legal battle, the Royal Navy was cleared of all liability, leaving the White Star Line with an enormous bill for repairs and a significant loss of revenue while their flagship was out of service. This incident was a financial catastrophe for the company. Now, you must analyze this situation from the perspective of the ship's owners. J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine. You are not dealing with sentimental sailors. You are dealing with the most ruthless capitalists of the age. To them, a ship is an asset on a balance sheet. The damaged Olympic was a depreciating asset, a bleeding wound in their ledger. The repairs were not only staggeringly expensive, but, some marine engineers argued, could never truly restore the ship to its original structural integrity. Meanwhile, in the same Belfast shipyard, its pristine sister, the Titanic, was nearing completion, a perfect, unblemished asset. And here, the switch theory is born. It is a theory of breathtaking cynicism and cold corporate logic. The plan: secretly swap the identities of the 2 ships. Send the image of 2 colossal ships, their identities swapped under the gray Belfast sky, creates a profound sense of vertigo. If the vessel itself was a lie, then everything on it becomes suspect. You feel like you're in a hall of mirrors where every reflection is a distortion. Was the precious cargo just a phantom on an insurance claim, as the switch theory suggests? To find the truth, you must anchor yourself to a real object, something with a documented history that existed both before and after the sinking. You let the grand conspiracy of the switch fade and focus on a single massive crate logged in the cargo hold. A piece of cargo whose loss was mourned not by bankers, but by the art world. This is the story of a lost masterpiece. Your verifiable fact is buried in the archives of French art history, and confirmed by insurance claims filed after the disaster. The Titanic was carrying an enormous oil painting by the neoclassical artist Marie-Joseph Blondel. The painting was titled La Circassienne au Bain, the Circassian Woman at the Bath. This was not a minor work. It was a monumental canvas, measuring over 8 feet tall, celebrated at the Paris Salon of 1814. It depicted a life-sized nude woman. It's a subject of immense controversy and fascination at the time. The claim for the lost painting was filed by its owner, a young Swedish timber scion named Moritz Håkan Bernström Stefansson, who survived the sinking. He filed a claim for $100,000, an astronomical sum for a piece of art in 1912, equivalent to millions of dollars today. It was, by value, the single greatest cultural loss of the disaster. You analyze the psychological power of this specific object. A masterpiece painting is not like gold or diamonds. It possesses a unique aura. It has a name, a history, a creator. It is a singular entity, a piece of a culture's soul, given physical form. Its loss is not just a financial deficit, it's a hole in the fabric of art history. The story of the lost Blondel, much like the great Omar, creates a powerful and romantic narrative of its own. It speaks to the fragility of beauty and the indiscriminate power of fate. The image of this celebrated canvas, a silent icon of beauty and grace, sinking into the crushing black void, is deeply poignant. It provides another emotionally resonant and ultimately distracting storyline. It captures the imagination with a sense of noble tragedy, drawing attention away from the more sordid, mechanical aspects of the conspiracy you've been uncovering. But as you dig into the painting's provenance, the image of the master curator, the invisible hand arranging this exhibition of secrets, haunts you. It suggests a level of orchestration that is almost beyond human comprehension. To find evidence of such a hand, you need to move beyond the manifests and passenger lists, beyond the documented cargo. You need to find evidence of something that was never supposed to be there at all. You need to find a space on the ship that doesn't exist on any official blueprint. Your search takes you back to the very bones of the vessel, to the testimonies of the men who kept its heart beating, the stokers, firemen, and engineers. You find your verifiable fact in the transcripts of the British Wreck Commissioner's inquiry, specifically in the testimonies of the Black Gang, the men who toiled in the hellish heat of the boiler rooms. One man, a stoker named John Podesta, gave a brief but chilling account. He spoke of the daily routine, the relentless work of feeding the ship's 29 boilers. But he mentioned something that, at the time, was passed over as an irrelevant detail. He described a section of the forward cargo hold near Boiler Room 6 that was different from the rest. He said it was closed off, walled up with fresh timbers that looked hastily installed. The crew gossiped about it. The official explanation was that it was a refrigerated section for perishable goods, but the stokers knew better. There was no sign of the brine pipes required for refrigeration. It was simply a dead space, a sealed-off box within the ship's hull. You analyze the psychology of this sealed room. On a ship where every square inch of space is a valuable, revenue-generating commodity, a large, inaccessible void is an anomaly that screams for attention.
Ow.
It is a physical manifestation of a secret. Its very existence is a provocation to the natural curiosity of a ship's crew. A famously observant and superstitious group, the hasty, temporary look of the timber walls suggests it was not part of the original design, but a last-minute modification. This creates a powerful sense of mystery and unease. Why build a room only to make it inaccessible? This isn't just poor design. It's a deliberate act of concealment, an architectural lie. The room becomes a black hole in the ship's geography, and as with all vacuums, speculation rushes in to fill it. This is where you delve into the bizarre and quirky history of clandestine transport. You uncover the practices of a nearly forgotten organization from the age of sail. A guild of master smugglers known as the heat from the spectral fire in Boiler Room 6 seems to radiate through the archives, a ghost of the force designed to incinerate the ship's secrets. The sealed room represents the ultimate hidden cargo, a secret so volatile it had to be destroyed from within. But as the smoke clears in your mind, a different kind of value glitters in the dark. It is not the value of secrets to be destroyed, but the value of assets to be claimed. You turn your attention away from the ship's hidden voids and back to its most visible, celebrated cargo, its wealthy passengers. You move from the world of conspirators to the world of inheritors. And the story of the Titanic becomes a story about what was left behind. Your verifiable historical fact is found in the colossal and complex insurance claims that followed the disaster. The sinking of the Titanic triggered the largest single-event insurance loss in history up to that point. The claims were not just for the ship itself, but for the lives lost and the property that went down with it. And among these claims, one category stands out for its staggering, almost unbelievable value: diamonds. Wealthy women of the Edwardian era traveled with their jewels, and the Titanic was a veritable floating vault. You analyze the psychological dimension of this river of jewels. Diamonds, more than any other commodity, represent a concentration of value. They are small, portable, and immensely precious. They are the ultimate currency, transcending national borders and financial systems. In the public imagination, the story of the lost diamonds adds another layer of romantic tragedy to the sinking. It evokes images of treasure chests, of glittering fortunes scattered across the seafloor, waiting to be discovered. It's a powerful narrative that, like the stories of the lost art and the great Omar, focuses on a tangible, understandable loss. It is a story about money, but in a way that feels more like a fairy tale than a financial report. And once again, you recognize the scent of misdirection, while the world dreams of sunken treasure. The real financial transaction is happening in the boardrooms of insurance companies. This is where you dive into the murky, unexplored perspectives of the international diamond trade of the early 20th century. The industry was controlled by a tight-knit and deeply secretive cartel. They understood that the value of a diamond is not based on its rarity. Diamonds are relatively common, but on the perception of its rarity. Their entire business model was based on controlling supply, managing public perception, and maintaining an iron grip on the market. The image of the dustmasters coldly sacrificing a fortune in diamonds to protect an even greater one reveals a new layer of ruthless, pragmatic evil. The sinking becomes a multi-purpose event, a single catastrophe serving the needs of political assassins, arms dealers, and financial cartels. The threads of conspiracy are weaving together into a complex and horrifying tapestry. But all these threads, the opposition to the Federal Reserve, the secret munitions, the insurance scams, are rooted in the internal power struggles of the Anglo-American establishment. Now, you must turn your gaze outward, across the English Channel, to the Titanic's most formidable rival, the burgeoning German Empire. Your investigation leads you to a verifiable historical fact that, in the context of 1912, was an open secret. The naval arms race between Great Britain and Germany was the defining geopolitical reality of the era. It was a Cold War fought in shipyards and engine works. Britain, with its centuries-long tradition of naval supremacy, was being challenged for the first time by Germany's new, technologically advanced high-seas fleet. This wasn't just a military competition. It was a battle for national pride, economic dominance, and the future of global trade. The White Star Line's Olympic-class liners were a key move in this game. They were Britain's civilian statement of superiority. Bigger, and faster, and more luxurious than anything Germany could produce. The flagship of this fleet, the Titanic, was more than a ship. It was a symbol of British industrial might and a direct challenge to German ambition. You analyze the sinking from the perspective of a German naval intelligence officer. The Titanic is not a tragedy. It's an opportunity. The destruction of your rival's most potent symbol on its maiden voyage is a propaganda victory of immeasurable value. It's a powerful public statement. Your unsinkable ship is, in fact, sinkable. Your technological superiority is an illusion. Your dominion over the seas is over. The sinking serves as a massive psychological blow to British morale and a powerful boost to German confidence. It sows doubt among Britain's allies and customers. The accident achieves what a naval battle might not. Without the formal death, the idea of the ship's steel being poisoned from within, a victim of the Krupp steel sickness, is a chilling thought. It makes the iceberg collision feel less like the cause of the disaster and more like the final. It's an inevitable test of a compromised structure. The German sabotage plot provides a powerful external explanation for the sinking. But you know that the most complex events are rarely the product of a single cause. The actions of the polar bears may explain how the ship sank so quickly. But it doesn't explain the intricate web of secrets on the ship. To understand that, you must turn your focus back to the men who were eliminated, specifically to the most powerful and enigmatic of them all. John Jacob Astor IV. Your verifiable historical fact is drawn from the sworn testimony of the survivors. Multiple witnesses, including his young, pregnant wife Madeline, described Colonel Astor's behavior in his final hours. He was not panicked. He was not hysterical. By all accounts, he was preternaturally calm, almost methodical. After the collision, he went to the bridge to inquire about the situation. He was seen cutting open a spare life belt with a penknife to show his wife what was inside, seemingly to reassure her. He helped her and her maid into Lifeboat 4, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, and then stepped back. When an officer told him he could not board until all women and children were away, he didn't argue. He simply nodded, lit a cigar, and stood on the deck, watching the lifeboat row away into the darkness. His last reported act was to stand by the rail with the author Jacques Futrelle smoking. His body was recovered over a week later, surprisingly undamaged, his pockets containing over $2,400 in cash. You must analyze the psychology of this man's final moments. This is not the behavior of a man helplessly caught in a disaster. It is the behavior of a soldier, a man who has accepted his fate and is now executing a final, predetermined protocol. John Jacob Astor IV was not just a real estate mogul. He was a military man, a lieutenant colonel who had seen action in the Spanish-American War. His calmness was not resignation. It was discipline. The detail of him cutting open the lifebelt is particularly strange. Was it really to reassure his wife? Or was it a signal? A prearranged sign to someone watching from another lifeboat, or even on the deck, that a certain phase of a plan was complete? Astor's final stand, a lonely sentinel protecting a terrible secret from the world, creates a haunting image of duty fulfilled at the ultimate cost. His calculated sacrifice was the action of a man who understood the true weight of what he carried. But in the chaos of that night, with over 2,200 souls fighting for survival, one man was not thinking about secrets to be buried. He was thinking about secrets to be preserved. He was thinking about evidence. You turn your attention from the man who died to protect a device, to the man who may have died trying to document the truth. This is the story of the lost film canister. Your verifiable historical fact comes from the passenger manifest and the testimony of survivors. Among the second-class passengers was a man named William Thomas Stead, whom you encountered earlier as the spiritualist and crusading journalist. But Stead was not alone in his profession aboard the ship. There was another journalist, a lesser-known figure whose story has been largely overlooked, Jacques Futrelle, the mystery writer and correspondent. Futrelle was traveling with his wife, May, returning from a European assignment. He was known for his detective fiction, but he was also a working journalist with an eye for corruption and scandal. According to his wife's later testimony, Futrelle had been working on what he called the story of the century during the voyage. She described him as excited, almost obsessed, spending hours writing in his cabin and asking unusual questions of the crew and first-class passengers. You analyze the psychology of a journalist in Futrelle's position. Here's a man who makes his living by uncovering secrets, surrounded by some of the most powerful and secretive men in the world. The Titanic, for a man like Futrelle, wasn't just a ship, was the ultimate opportunity, was a floating conference of the global elite. A rare moment when titans of industry and finance were trapped in a confined space, accessible and observable. For an investigative journalist, it would be like having exclusive access to the most exclusive club in the world. His excitement, as described by his wife, makes perfect sense. He had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that justified his superlative claim of the story of the century. This is where you delve into the unexplored perspectives of early photojournalism. The lost film canister represents the ultimate frustration of the investigator, evidence that exists but cannot be reached. Futrelle's potential hidden copies offer a glimmer of hope, but they remain speculation. Now, you must turn your attention from the grand gestures of documentation to the small, intimate moments of communication. In the final hours of the Titanic, as the ship settled deeper into the water and the reality of the disaster became undeniable, the conspirators faced a new challenge. Their carefully orchestrated plan was succeeding, but success brought its own problems. They needed to coordinate to ensure that their stories aligned, that their alibis were solid, and that any remaining loose ends were tied up. This communication couldn't happen through grand speeches or formal meetings. It had to be subtle, coded, and deniable. This is the story of the ciphers on a napkin. Your verifiable historical fact comes from the detailed accounts of the Titanic's final dinner service and the testimonies of the dining room staff who survived. On the evening of April 14th, the ship's La Carte restaurant and the first-class dining saloon served their final meals with the usual impeccable service. The white linen napkins, embossed with the White Star Line logo, were changed between courses as was customary. But several survivors, including dining room stewards, later reported something unusual about that final evening. They noticed an abnormal number of napkins being discarded, not soiled with food, but apparently clean. More strangely, some passengers seemed to be taking their napkins with them when they left the dining room, folding them carefully and placing them in their pockets. At the time, it was dismissed as eccentricity or perhaps souvenirs of the maiden voyage. You analyze this behavior through the lens of covert communication. A napkin is the perfect medium for a secret message. The wine-stained napkins, carriers of final instructions and death sentences, dissolve into the dark water of your imagination. The conspirators have had their final meeting, their last communion of shared guilt. But as you move away from the realm of calculated human evil, you find yourself drawn to something far stranger and more unsettling. The possibility that the disaster was foreseen, predicted and documented by individuals who had no earthly way of knowing what was coming. This is the story of the psychic's premonition. It's a narrative that challenges not just your understanding of the Titanic disaster, but your understanding of reality itself. Your verifiable historical fact is found in the documented records of the British Society for Psychical Research and contemporary newspapers. In the months leading up to the Titanic's maiden voyage, an unusual number of psychics, mediums, and clairvoyants across Europe and America reported disturbing visions related to a great ship meeting its doom in the icy waters of the Atlantic. Most famously, a British medium named Hervé claimed to have received a detailed psychic impression in March 1912. Describing a massive passenger liner striking ice and sinking with tremendous loss of life. He was so disturbed by the vision that he wrote letters to several shipping companies, warning them of the impending disaster. The letters, which still exist in various archives, were dismissed as the ravings of a crank. But Turvey was not alone. A spiritualist in New York named Mrs. Annie Britton claimed to have seen the disaster. In a dream weeks before it occurred, describing not just the sinking, but specific details about the band playing on deck, and the inadequate number of lifeboats. Most chilling of all was the testimony of a Welsh clairvoyant named Mrs. Blanche Marshall, who claimed that the spirit of a deceased sailor had appeared to her warning of a ship of the dead that would soon join him beneath the waves. She gave public readings about this vision in early April 1912, just days before the Titanic departed Southampton. You analyze the psychology of these predictions from a skeptical but open perspective. The human mind has an extraordinary capacity for pattern recognition, OFTE, and perceiving connections and possibilities that the conscious mind cannot articulate. These psychics may have been unconsciously synthesizing information that was available to them. The increasing tensions between European powers, the naval arms race, the reports of unusual ice conditions in the North Atlantic, and the general sense of impending catastrophe that seemed to permeate the early 20th century, their visions may have been their subconscious minds processing these signals and extrapolating a logical, if tragic, conclusion. But there's another, more disturbing possibility. What if these psychics were not truly clairvoyant, but were instead unwitting recipients of leaked information? This leads you to investigate the bizarre practices of a little-known intelligence operation from the era. It's a psychological warfare unit that operated within the German diplomatic service, known as the Morpheus Division. Their specialty was not traditional espionage, but what they called prophetic warfare. The deliberate seeding of accurate predictions into the spiritual and occult communities of enemy nations. Their method was ingenious and deeply cynical. They would identify genuine psychics and mediums who had established reputations and followings. Then, subtly feed them accurate information about planned operations through intermediaries who posed as fellow spiritualists or concerned citizens. The psychics, believing they were receiving supernatural revelations, would share these visions with their clients and the public. When the psychic predictions fade like static, leaving a disquieting sense of manufactured destiny. You have followed the threads of conspiracy through the corridors of power, the back alleys of the underworld, and the invisible realm of the airwaves. You must descend. You leave the world of 1912 entirely and plunge into the crushing, absolute darkness of the present day. You are 2.5 miles beneath the surface of the North Atlantic. Inside the cramped, humming control room of a deep-sea submersible, the only light is the green glow of sonar screens and the stark white beam of your remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, as it glides silently over a landscape of mud and ghosts. This is the wreck of the Titanic. Your verifiable historical fact is the moment this ghost became real. For 73 years, the ship was a myth, its location a mystery. Then, on September 1st, 1985, a joint French-American expedition led by Dr. Robert Ballard found it. And the very first images sent back to the surface delivered a shock that rewrote the history of the sinking. The official inquiries, based on survivor testimony, had concluded that the ship sank intact, a single, majestic piece sliding beneath the waves. The video feed from Ballard's ROV revealed a brutal, undeniable truth. The Titanic had broken in two. The bow and stern sections lay on the ocean floor nearly 2,000 feet apart, separated by a vast, chaotic debris field. The unsinkable ship hadn't just sunk. It had been violently torn asunder. You analyze the psychological impact of this discovery. The wreck is no longer a romantic notion. It is a real place, a gravesite. As your ROV's camera pans across the decaying deck, you see things that ground the tragedy in a profoundly human way. A pair of leather boots, side by side, where a body once lay. A child's doll, its face half buried in the silt. Unopened bottles of champagne in the debris field, their contents still sparkling after a century in the abyss. These artifacts transform the victims from statistics into people. But for you, this is also a crime scene. And the first piece of evidence, the ship breaking apart, contradicts the official story. This isn't just a discovery. It's the reopening of a case that the world thought was closed. Your investigation leads you into the highly specialized world of modern wreck analysis and the quirky, almost paranoid subculture that exists within it. You learn of a clandestine group of deep-sea technicians and data analysts who call themselves the abyssal cartographers. They believe that the official televised expeditions to the wreck are pure theater. Their core belief is that the wreck site is still an active variable in the conspiracies that created it and that powerful. Modern-day successors to the Janus Conclave or the Dustmasters use sophisticated technology to protect its remaining secrets. Their bizarre methodology involves ignoring the video feeds and focusing on the raw telemetry from the ROVs. They have a cipher that isn't a language, but a pattern of telemetric signatures. They claim that certain areas of the wreck have been bugged. The telemetric static from the abyssal data trap fades from your console. The guarded wreck site, a crime scene 2.5 miles down, refuses to give up its physical secrets. You are forced to ascend, leaving the cold, dark tomb behind and returning to the bright, sterile world of numbers, ledgers, and contracts. You realize the abyssal cartographers were right. The map to this conspiracy isn't written in rust and mud. It's written in ink, in the financial archives of the City of London. The truth isn't at the bottom of the ocean. It's in the bottom line. Here is your verifiable historical fact, a detail of astonishing speed and efficiency. Lloyd's of London, the lead insurer for the Titanic, paid the White Star Line's claim for the loss of the hull in full, a sum of £1 million, approximately $5 million at the time, within 30 days of the disaster. In an era before electronic transfers, this was lightning fast. The swift payment was lauded in the press as a testament to the integrity and resilience of the London insurance market. It was a demonstration of honor, a promise kept. You must analyze the powerful psychological effect of this transaction. It was the perfect final chapter to the official story. The tragedy occurred, heroes were made, victims were mourned, and now, the financial obligations were settled with quiet dignity. The full and rapid payout acted as a full stop at the end of a sentence. It validated the sinking as a legitimate, unforeseen accident. After all, If there were any hint of fraud or foul play, the famously meticulous underwriters at Lloyd's would have launched a multi-year investigation. Their swift payment was a declaration to the world. Case closed. This act of financial closure created a powerful deterrent to further inquiry. It projected an aura of legitimacy that made any lingering questions seem not just speculative, but disrespectful. But your investigation has trained you to see that in the world of high finance, any event that looks too good to be true usually is. This leads you into the arcane world of maritime insurance and the deeply cynical subculture that thrives in its shadows. You discover the faint historical traces of a group so secretive they had no formal name, but were known in whispers among finances as the calamity auditors. They were not criminals in the traditional sense. They were financial architects. They specialized in structuring insurance and reinsurance contracts for the express purpose of profiting from massive engineered disasters. To them, a shipwreck, a factory fire, or a stock market crash was not a tragedy. It was a liquidity event, a pre-planned mechanism for converting inconvenient physical assets into clean, untraceable cash. Their bizarre methodology was a masterpiece of financial deception they called the Cascade. It involved a complex web of reinsurance. On the surface, a major asset like the Titanic would be insured by a reputable lead underwriter like Lloyd's. But that primary policy was then reinsured by a long, obscure chain of smaller international companies. To an outside observer, this looks like standard practice, the lead insurer spreading its risk. But the calamity auditors owned these smaller reinsurance companies through anonymous shell corporations. Their cipher was the reinsurance chain itself. The specific sequence of these companies, a list of firms from Panama to Trieste to Macau, was the coded signal that the cascade of reinsurance money settles, a silent, glittering monument to a perfectly executed crime. The calamity auditors have built their financial engine of destruction, a machine that turns tragedy into profit with chilling efficiency. But a machine, no matter how perfect, needs an operator. A plan this audacious requires more than just money and motive. Requires a man on the inside, a figure with the authority and the opportunity to execute the final fatal commands. Your investigation now comes to rest on the solitary, stoic figure on the bridge, Captain Edward John Smith. Your verifiable historical fact is his celebrated and seemingly unblemished career. Captain Smith was the millionaire's captain, the seasoned, white-bearded commodore of the White Star Line, beloved by wealthy passengers and trusted implicitly by his employers. The maiden voyage of the Titanic was meant to be his glorious farewell, the capstone to a 40-year career. He was, by all public accounts, the most experienced and respected captain in the North Atlantic. This pristine reputation is the very foundation of the official narrative. How could a man like this, a paragon of nautical virtue, ever be complicit in such a monstrous act? You analyze the immense psychological weight placed upon this single man. He is the public face of the ship's safety, the living embodiment of the White Star Line's promise of reliability. This makes him the perfect tool for the conspiracy. His sterling reputation acts as the ultimate shield. Any order he gives, no matter how reckless it may seem in hindsight, is insulated by his decades of experience. In order to maintain high speed in an ice field, coming from a younger, less experienced captain might raise alarms. Coming from Captain Smith, it is seen as a calculated risk taken by the master of his craft. His reputation isn't just an asset, it's a weapon used to disarm the critical faculties of his own officers and crew. This is where you must explore the hidden pressures and unexplored perspectives of a man at the end of his career. What if his final voyage wasn't the triumphant retirement the public believed it to be? Your research leads you into the shadowy world of corporate loyalty and the quiet, brutal ways large companies can exert control. You uncover the historical whispers of an unofficial internal security, an enforcement arm within J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine, a group known to terrified employees only as the Adjusters. Their purpose was not to manage cargo, but to manage people. The Adjusters were masters of leverage. They would spend years meticulously gathering, compromising information compromising key employees, from captains to chief engineers. A gambling debt, a secret affair, a past professional error that was quietly covered up, A pall of it was filed away, a portfolio of human weakness to be used when needed. There, bizarre cipher was not a code, but an employment contract. A clause offering an unusually generous pension, or a bonus that seemed disproportionately large, was their signal. It was the silken glove concealing an iron fist. It meant, "We own you. So refuse to cooperate when the time comes, and the contents of your file will be made public, your career and reputation destroyed." You look back at Captain Smith's career with this new lens. Was he really the flawless commander of public record? Or was there a secret in his past, a mistake on a previous voyage, grounding, or a collision that was quietly erased from the logs by his powerful employers? The collision of the Olympic with the HMS Hawk, a ship he was commanding, takes on a new light, though he was officially cleared. Was there more to the story? Was that incident the leverage the adjusters needed? Was his assignment to the prestigious Titanic not a reward, but a final, inescapable obligation? His orders for the voyage are no longer his own. He is not a captain. He is a puppet, the command to maintain speed. To ignore the ice warnings piling up on the Marconi operator's desk, these are not his decisions. They are instructions being relayed to him. Perhaps through a trusted intermediary on board, a minder from J.P. Morgan's inner circle. His stoic, almost detached demeanor throughout the voyage, noted by several passengers, is not the calm of a confident commander. The image of Captain Smith, a puppet on the bridge, man whose honor was the final weapon used against him, is the most tragic and human element of the conspiracy so far. The plan seems complete, every angle accounted for, every contingency managed. You have explored conspiracies of finance, war, crime, and sabotage. Now, you must take one final, vertiginous step, leaving behind the realm of the merely improbable and entering the world of the physically impossible. You must confront the most bizarre and far-fetched theory of all, the idea of a time traveler on the Titanic. This theory has no verifiable historical fact to support it, and that is its defining characteristic. It exists purely in the realm of speculation, a ghost in the historical machine that refuses to be exorcised. The theory, in its most common form, posits that a person from our future, equipped with the knowledge of the disaster, traveled back to 1912 with the intention of preventing it. This temporal agent would have known the date, of the time, the location of the collision, and the reasons for the catastrophic loss of life. Their mission, to alter the timeline and save the 1,500 souls destined to perish. You must analyze this not as a serious scientific proposition, but as a powerful psychological narrative. The idea of a time traveler is a modern myth that serves a deep human need, the desire for agency in the face of irreversible tragedy. It is a fantasy of rescue, a story that says, what if someone could have fixed it? Reframes the disaster from a story of human error and hubris into a cosmic battle against a fixed point in time. The failure of the time traveler to prevent the sinking only reinforces the sense of tragic inevitability that you've seen manufactured by the conspirators themselves. The theory, in a strange way, supports the official narrative by making the disaster feel faded and unchangeable. But as you explore the fringes of this idea, you uncover a quirky and disturbing sub-theory, a narrative whispered on the deepest, most obscure corners of the web. This theory comes from a supposed leaked document from a rogue archivist of a future historical society, a group calling themselves the Guardians of the Canon. This document claims that a temporal agent was indeed on the Titanic, but their mission was not to prevent the sinking. Their mission was to ensure it, according to this bizarre narrative. The sinking of the Titanic is what is known in temporal mechanics as a canon event, or an absolute point. An event so foundational to the subsequent development of history that its alteration would cause catastrophic civilization-ending paradoxes. The document alleges that in the original, unaltered timeline, the Titanic did not sink. It arrived safely in New York, and the men who were supposed to die, Astor, Guggenheim, and Straus, went on to successfully block the creation of the Federal Reserve. This led to a century of global financial instability, culminating in a devastating world war in the late 20th century fought with unimaginable weapons, a war that shattered civilization. The Guardians of the Canon therefore had a terrible duty. They had to send an agent back not to save the Titanic but to ensure its destruction. This agent's task was a masterpiece of subtle sabotage. They didn't need a bomb, they just needed to make a series of tiny, almost unnoticeable interventions. Their cipher was chaos theory, a misplaced pair of binoculars belonging to the lookouts. A mistranscribed message in the Marconi room. Carelessly stacked pile of coal that exacerbated the bunker fire. A casually dropped word in Captain Smith's ear that encouraged him to maintain speed. Each action on its own is trivial, but together they create a butterfly effect. A cascade of minor failures that guide the ship inexorably towards the iceberg. This temporal assassin would be the most invisible player of all. They would appear on no passenger list, leave no physical trace. It would be a ghost, a whisper, a nudge. Their only goal was to ensure that all the other conspiracies you have uncovered the German sabotage. The insurance fraud, the political assassinations all came to fruition on that specific night. The time traveler wasn't a rival conspirator. They were the conductor of the entire orchestra of doom, making sure every instrument played its part at the correct moment. The sinking is now reframed as a terrible but necessary cosmic surgery. The 1,500 lives lost were a sacrifice to prevent the deaths of billions. The event is no longer a crime but a tragic necessity, the lesser of two evils. The agent, having completed their horrifying mission, would have quietly boarded a lifeboater, perhaps simply vanished from the timeline altogether there. Heart heavy with the knowledge of what they had done in the name of the greater good. It is the ultimate conspiracy, one that uses all the other conspiracies as its unwitting tools. It provides the final, terrible answer to why so many different plots converged on a single ship, on a single... The idea of a temporal agent, a lonely guardian from the future sacrificing 1,500 souls to save billions, offers a strange and horrifying kind of comfort. It frames the disaster as a necessary, albeit brutal, act in a cosmic chess game. Provides a reason. But you must now pull back from this precipice of speculative physics and return to the cold, hard ground of human ambition. What if the script for this tragedy was not written in the future to save humanity, but written in the present to control it? What if the sinking of the Titanic was not a means to an end, but an end in itself? What if the true hidden cargo was not opium or diamonds, but an idea of terror? Your verifiable historical fact is the unprecedented global media reaction to the sinking. Thanks to the very Marconi wireless system that was so tragically mismanaged, the news of the disaster spread with a speed previously unimaginable. Newspapers from New York to London, from Paris to Sydney, ran sensational banner headlines before the full truth was even known. For the first time in human history, the entire civilized world experienced a single catastrophic event in near real time. It was not a story read in a history book weeks or months later. It was a raw, unfolding trauma. The world became a single, captive audience, huddled around telegraph offices and newsstands, hanging on every fragmented, terrifying detail. You analyze this event not as a news story, but as the largest and most successful act of psychological warfare ever committed. The core belief of the Edwardian era, the foundational myth of the early 20th century, was a faith in progress. It was a belief in technology, in human ingenuity, in the idea that mankind had finally tamed nature. The Titanic was the ultimate icon of this belief. It was not just a ship. It was a floating cathedral to the god of technology. It was man's declaration that he was the master of his own destiny. And the conspirators took this symbol, this icon of safety and certainty, and they deliberately, methodically, and spectacularly shattered it in front of the entire world. The goal was not just to sink a ship. The goal was to sink a belief system. This brings you to the darkest corner of your investigation, to a group so amorphous and influential, they are almost impossible to trace. They are not financiers or spies in the traditional sense. They're social engineers, architects of perception. In your research, you'll find oblique references to a crowd dynamics consortium, a transatlantic think tank of sociologists, psychologists, and public relations pioneers. Their work was based on a simple, terrifying premise that a society's collective consciousness can be violently reshaped by the application of a single, perfectly executed symbolic trauma. Their bizarre and cynical methodology was built around a lexicon of what they called trauma archetypes. These were specific, recurring narrative patterns that had the power to bypass rational thought and strike directly at the primitive, emotional core of the human psyche. They had blueprints for inducing specific societal states, the invisible enemy archetype to justify surveillance, the righteous sacrifice to glorify war, and their masterpiece, the fallen Titan. This archetype required finding the strongest, most trusted symbol of a society's power and security and utterly destroying it. The purpose was to induce a state of mass anxiety, to prove that there is no safety, no certainty, and that the institutions and technologies you trust are fallible. A population in a state of chronic, low-grade terror, they theorized, is infinitely more malleable and controllable. The Titanic was the perfect candidate for a fallen Titan operation. Its very name, its billing as unsinkable, was not a liability for the conspirators. It was the entire point. The disaster was crafted moment by moment for maximum psychological impact. Think of it as a perfectly scripted horror film broadcast to the world. Calm before the storm, the ignored warnings, the sudden shocking impact, the slow inexorable descent into the freezing water. The band playing on the deck, a symbol of order descending into chaos. The lights flickering and dying, plunging the world's most luxurious stage into darkness. The heart-wrenching separation of families, the screams echoing across the water. Every detail was a perfectly tuned note in a symphony of fear. This act of psychological terror was the air cover for all the other conspiracies. A frightened public, suddenly convinced that the world is a dangerous and unpredictable place, will not question the consolidation of financial power into a central bank that promises stability. They will not look too closely at the convenient elimination of powerful men. They will accept the narrative they are given because the alternative that the world is governed by pure, random chaos is too terrifying to contemplate. The sinking of the Titanic didn't just clear a path for the Federal Reserve. It created the idea of the sinking as a symbolic trauma, a grand piece of psychological theater designed to shatter the world's faith in progress, is a profoundly disturbing one. It suggests that the true target was not a ship, but the collective mind of a generation. If you destroy the old belief system, you must have a new one ready to take its place. This leads you to the final, most tangible theory of hidden cargo. You have considered jewels, opium, weapons, and secrets. But what if the most valuable cargo on board was a history? Not a history to be saved, but one to be permanently and irretrievably erased. This is the story of the archive that vanished. Your verifiable historical fact is found in the meticulous records of the United States Postal Service and the British Royal Mail. The Titanic was an officially designated Royal Mail ship, RMS. Its sea post office, staffed by 5 postal clerks, all of whom died in the sinking, was responsible for 3,423 sacks of mail, containing an estimated 7 million individual pieces of correspondence. This was a massive, moving archive, cross-section of the transatlantic world's thoughts, business dealings, and personal secrets. The postal clerks worked heroically during the sinking, moving the mail sacks up to higher decks in a futile attempt to save them. The mail went down with the ship. You analyze the psychological significance of this lost mail. It is a story of quiet heroism and dedication to duty. The image of the postal clerks fighting to save the mail, while others fought to save themselves, is a poignant footnote to the larger tragedy. It reinforces the theme of duty and order in the face of chaos. But from the perspective of a conspiracy, this official narrative is, once again, the perfect cover. The vast, anonymous mass of 7 million letters provides an impenetrable haystack in which to hide a very small, but very important needle. The heroic efforts of the postal clerks, while genuine, provide a noble explanation for why this particular cargo was given so much attention. This leads you to explore the shadowy history of governmental memory holing, the practice of deliberately destroying inconvenient historical records. You uncover faint traces of a secret pact between certain factions within the British and American governments of the era, a group that historians have speculatively dubbed the Atlantic Committee. Their purpose was to harmonize the historical narratives of the two nations, ensuring that the official histories presented a unified, heroic, and mutually beneficial story. This often involved the quiet removal of documents that revealed past conflicts, diplomatic blunders, or special relationship betrayals. Their bizarre methodology, according to these speculative histories, was called archival migration. They would never simply burn sensitive documents, as this would leave a suspicious gap in the records. Instead, they would collect the problematic archives treaties, letters, financial agreements, spy reports, and package them for shipment to a sister archive across the ocean. The documents would be officially logged out of one system and logged into the transit system. But during the migration, the shipment would be arranged to have a catastrophic, but plausibly deniable accident. A train derailment, a warehouse fire, or, in the most ambitious cases, a shipwreck. The documents were not destroyed, they were lost in transit, a bureaucratic euphemism that erased them from history without leaving a telltale vacuum. Now you see the Titanic sea post office not as a mailroom, but as a mobile incinerator. What if hidden among those 3,423 sacks of ordinary mail, there were a few dozen sacks containing the problematic archives of the Atlantic Committee? Perhaps they contained the original secret treaties that showed how America had betrayed its French allies during the Revolutionary War. Or maybe they held the financial records proving that British banks had secretly funded both sides of the American Civil War. Or perhaps they contained the unedited correspondence between kings and presidents, full of the personal insults, racist remarks, petty grievances that are always scrubbed from the official histories. This archive would be the Rosetta Stone of the true ugly history of the Anglo-American relationship. Its public release would shatter the carefully constructed myth of the Astor relationship and could potentially destabilize the political alliance on the eve of a major world war. The sinking of the Titanic becomes the ultimate act of historical sanitization. It's not just a matter of killing a few inconvenient men. It's a matter of killing an inconvenient past. The 7 million pieces of ordinary mail are the perfect camouflage, and the sinking of a supposedly unsinkable ship provides the most dramatic and unquestionable proof of loss imaginable. The conspiracy has now achieved its final, most profound goal. It has eliminated the men who opposed its financial future. It has terrorized the public into a state of anxiety, making them receptive to new forms of control. And now, it has erased the historical records that would contradict the new narrative it is about to write. The slate has been wiped clean. You rise from the depths of the archives, leaving the ghosts of postal clerks and their waterlogged secrets behind. The journey is complete. You have navigated a labyrinth of interconnected conspiracies, each one a self-contained world of motive and method, yet each one a single, perfect facet of a much larger, more terrifying gem. The forgotten truth about the Titanic was never a single answer. It was not the mummy, or the car, or the diamonds alone. The truth surfaces slowly, like debris rising from a deep wreck, each piece telling a part of the story. The full picture only becoming clear when you assemble the fragments into an unsettling new mosaic. You see now that the ship was not the victim of one plot, but the host of many. It was a nexus, a point in space-time, where a dozen different narratives of power, greed and deception converged for one spectacular, catastrophic night. You see the financial architects, the calamity auditors, and their Janus conclave, laying the groundwork with the cold logic of the switch theory, creating a financial engine designed to turn a damaged asset into a mountain of clean cash. You see the political assassins, J.P. Morgan's allies, using this engine as a weapon to eliminate Astor, Guggenheim, and Straus, clearing the path for their Federal Reserve and a new century of financial control. Upon this foundation of cynical greed, other players built their own schemes. The German iceberg, seeing a strategic opportunity, seeded the ship's hull with their crump steel sickness, turning Britain's symbol of pride into a brittle, poisoned chalice. The Dustmasters saw a perfect stage for their ritual of market purification, a chance to sacrifice a fortune in rogue diamonds to protect their global cartel. And in the ship's holds a shadow economy thrived and dyed the opium for the tongs. Doomed empire, the secret munitions for a war yet to be declared, the treasure map hidden beneath. Blondel's nude and the industrial secrets etched into the very metal of the Renault. All these secrets, all these agendas, were loaded onto the ship. Each conspirator believing the vessels served their purpose alone, unaware that they were merely tenants in a much larger, more complex house of horrors. And guiding it all, a series of hands on the tiller. The compromised Captain Smith, a man of honor trapped by his past, forced to follow the final, fatal orders from his masters, the adjusters. The Marconi operators, their senses deliberately dulled by the electronic warfare of the Teth Corps, deaf to the warnings that could have saved them. The heroic journalist Futrell, his camera capturing the evidence that would be his death warrant. His lost film canister a testament to a truth almost told. And perhaps hovering above them all, the ghost from the future, the temporal agent, ensuring that every piece fell into its designated place. That every one of these terrible plans succeeded, all to avert an even greater catastrophe waiting in an alternate timeline. Finally, you see the grandest design of all, the work of the Crowd Dynamics Consortium. They were the producers of this global theater. They understood that the sinking itself was the ultimate payload. They used the combined force of all the other plots to stage their fallen titan's symbolic trauma. An act of psychological warfare so profound it shattered a generation's faith and ushered in a new age of anxiety, an age where frightened populations would willingly accept the control of the very forces that had terrorized them. The truth, you realize, is a palimpsest. Just like the hidden painting, each layer of conspiracy is painted over another, creating a single terrifying masterpiece. The Titanic was not a ship that had a secret. The Titanic was the secret, and its sinking was the moment that secret was simultaneously kept and revealed to the world. And so, we arrive at the end of our long night's journey. The echoes of the disaster, the whispers of conspiracy, begin to fade. The cold of the North Atlantic gives way to the quiet warmth of your own room. The frenetic energy of the investigation slows, the sharp edges of evidence softening into the gentle blur of history. You are left with the mosaic of fragments, a constellation of unsettling possibilities that hangs in the darkness of the past. The questions linger, as they should. The purpose of this journey was not to give you a single definitive answer to hold on to like a piece of wreckage. It was to demonstrate that history is not a static monument, but a living, breathing mystery, its surfaces constantly shifting, its depth